Hello, ballers! Welcome back to Baldur's Gate 3, where we need the Infinity Stones. Like, I'm running out of quests to do, and I'm tying up all my loose ends and things like that, and things are looking pretty good. I haven't really butchered... Okay, I did kill Thrumbo, but I haven't, like, done anything egregious in a while, so that's good news. But it had built up to the point where it was like, you need to kill Orin, you need to kill Gortash. We've defeated the Steel Watch, so that should change everything, besides that maniacal nightmare fight that I had with Gortash earlier on. It was one of the only times we had to actually, like, give up and reload, because we kind of crushed the whole game at that point. So, that was my game plan. I wasn't sure which way to go first, but one thing that bothered me from very early in Lower City is that I'd found a door that I couldn't open, which is really rare in Baldur's Gate 3, is to find something that's like, you can't progress. And I'm like, oh. And I'd been given the code word now in the Tombstone shop to go and find out what was going on. And it was something to do with Orin the Red, the Temple of Murder, something like that. So I was like, okay, I need to find it out because I'm curious. A door that's locked is weird and unusual, so we're going there. This, again, was reference to a previous game because I went in to meet the Council of Murder. You can imagine the memes that were going on about being in the Council of Murder because they kind of welcomed me in. They were like, oh, it's you. This is fine. I was like, okay. I am not the maniacal butcher that people make me out to be. But I was stood before the Council of Murder led by Savarok? Orin's granddad, anyway. Orin's grandpappy, who was there to judge me. Apparently a character from the previous games, one of the previous villains, is sitting atop this. And I'm there to be judged. Even I have to admit, they'd probably be kind of okay with me. Probably kind of okay. I'm not out to flay people or to, like, exsanguinate them in some mysterious way and let the rivers run red with blood. But, you know, they're probably fine with me. Obviously, this was going to throw down into a fight, though. There was no getting away from it. I, like, positioned my units and got ready for it as it did go down. Really interesting mechanics here. I liked the idea... that he was gaining buffs from the three counselors, and when you do engage in the fight, there was quite a lot of choices, and it kind of really demonstrated to me how the layouts of the battle arenas open the door for a lot of D&D trickery. So, for example, like, engaging this fight also activates all the guards that are in previous rooms. But there's a huge door there, and if I'd known about it and prepared for it, say I was doing an honor mode run, I could easily have closed that door and, like, sealed that door. So I could have, like, locked a lot of enemies out of the fight. And then started to deal with the three counselors and Savarok himself. As it was with my characters, it seemed logical to me to just beat the living snot out of Savarok quickly, because the buffs that the counselors have are tied to him existing. So that made a lot of sense to me, is to just try and zerg him down as quickly as possible. Because I am capable of doing that with my characters if they focus up and I get haste. I have double haste. I have haste on my Barb coming from Karlach. I have some hasty boots that I can put onto Jaheira as a rogue. And I can really unleash some massive damage. So I managed to, like, line of sight myself into a corner away from some of the counselors. And just go at Savarok, which worked out really well. Like, killed him very, very quickly, allowing me to finish off the counselors. And because the other guards were tied to Savarok existing, they just exploded and died. Meaning that we now were granted access to the actual Temple of Murder, where we'll have the showdown with Orin. I've said this before. I don't like Orin as a character. It edges into comedy for me. And I know some people don't get this. I really understand that for some people, really dark, macabre themes, when it gets really, really dark in some storytelling, people get very affected by it. I go in a different direction. If it gets too absurd, it turns into comedy for me. Because it's just so ridiculous. Despite the fact that there are countless untold horrors in the actual world, it's obviously not how my life is, and most of our lives who are watching this. And so once it keeps compounding on itself and there's never an ounce of joy, it kind of gets funny for me. I don't know, it's just my personality. I start laughing at it. It happened to me in Final Fantasy 16, and some people got very upset. They're like, dude, this is like, they're burning children here. And I'm like, yeah, but even thinking about it makes me laugh. It's like, yeah, but for the last 4 hours, It's been like, and then it got worse, and then it got even worse, and then the monster came out of the crypt, and when we thought we'd beat that, then there was like 5 more down there that were like throwing skulls of parents at each other, and then we found the kid. It's like, okay, what's next? And then there's something else, and it reaches absurdity for me. Orin's kind of like that. She's so over the top and bloodthirsty, and she's like, I'm gonna skewer you, and I'm like, okay, sure. So made my way for the Temple of Murder. I had actually genuinely, as much as it was a meme, I'd forgot about Yenna, the little kid that Orin had kidnapped. That was something I was supposed to care about. Yenna's been kind of a tool to me. So I forgot about that because it come in and I was like, why is there a kid on the bench? And people are like, oh my god. Yeah, dude. Yenna, you know, she's been kidnapped. I'm like, I don't know. And part of it is, there are so many stories in Baldur's Gate. There are, like, probably over 1,000 miniature stories going on. And unless it really captures me, by the time we circle back round to it, I've kind of forgotten certain elements. You know what it reminds me of? Like in World of Warcraft, where there's, like, this big epic moment. And then there's, like, time gating for, like, 3 months. And then there's, like, and then you remember this? I'm like, not really. A little bit, kind of, and it happens in Final Fantasy as well. Now that I enjoy the MSQ, like as it's released, is there are definitely details and elements, right? It's not the big stuff; it's the details and the little elements that I forget because we play like I don't know 30 games in the meantime. You know, it happens. There's a lot of stories that I take into my brain in the meantime. I'm not focused entirely on it. Okay, so that's kind of the deal. Getting to Orin, didn't like this fight. Bit sad, especially after how good Ketherick was. Ketherick, right now, is like the best fight I've done in the game so far. Really liked Ketherick. Really loved the reveal of the second phase. I liked the interaction you had with Isabel, although it didn't go well. And Dame was in the fight as well, so we had that other element going on. Didn't really have that with Orin. Orin immediately turns into a Slayer mode. The interesting thing that I didn't clock immediately when reading through the buffs and things was the giant skull. I could see the skull on the turn order, and that Orin has, what, like 12 or 15 stacks of Unstoppable, meaning she can't take any damage until you wear through those stacks, so magic missiles, which just repeatedly hits, is really good. So my first move was like, okay, I could see all the Kabbalists, or whatever we'll call them, like located around the room. I was like, okay, they're going to be either activated in some way, or join the fight, or that's a phase 2 thing, so I was expecting something like Ketherick. Obviously, I'm running through my head what's going to happen here. So my first move was to like get rid of the Unstoppables, and then I saw that every turn she gains the Unstoppable back based on the Ritualists, the Kabbalists, whatever you want to call them. I was like, oh cool. So I've got to take these guys out, but they're protected by a spell called Sanctuary, meaning like AoE works, but you can't single target them unless they attack you. So I was like, okay, do I want to like burn them all with Fireball or something like that to break them out of Sanctuary so I can then kill them? But they are at a ledge. And it's D&D rules. So I was like, can I just throw them off the ledge? Like, can I do that? And I couldn't physically pick them up, which was a bit of a bummer. So I was like, can I just, like, toss them everywhere or telekinesis them? But what I could do was use the Thundering Arrows, which AoE and knock back. And I could position to knock off, like, 2 of them at a time. So my goal then became to utilize where Shadowheart has become really excessively good at a tank, especially if she's got mirror images up. She's really hard to hit in general. She's super strong. And she has massive constitution, and she has mirror images. She could just tank, and generally speaking, Orin was attacking the closest person to her, although she did leap, which meant I could reposition people later, so that Shadowheart was the one who was getting focused. So I went with this maneuver while I just kind of ran around and shot everybody off the edge. Once that happened, Orin just died. She hit very hard, like if she did hit Jaheira or something, she took like most of their HP, but other than that, Orin just died, and I was like, oh, okay. Orin's dead now. And that's the end of that. So I would say that was a disappointing element. It's one thing I'm really hoping for at this point is that the game does pull off what Divinity Original Sin 2 did. Is that even though I was equally as powerful and as experienced with the game by this point, the last fight is still extremely hard. Like, I really respected that, because RPGs often suffer from power creep. If you enjoy the game and you do the side stories and you're not just racing through the main story, is that you can tend to get extremely powerful, and that kind of squashes the rest of the games. Like, Breath of the Wild would be the most egregious example of that. If you do play the game in terms of exploring it, then the last fight is comically easy and really disappointing. So I was hoping that wouldn't happen. I wouldn't say I was, like, super disappointed. It had some fun elements, like knocking the things off. But overall, Raphael was a better fight. And then it was time, I was like, okay, so we've done Orin, so let's go and find Gortash. Let's go and get that sorted, and then we've got all the Infinity Stones. Like, in terms of the MSQ, and this is often something I'll do in RPGs, and you guys will probably see again when we play Rogue Trader, which is coming up in summer, which is the Warhammer Baldur's Gate style RPG. CRPG, sorry. Is that at a certain point, I'll, like, tie it up so we can go to the end game, and I did this with all the single-player Final Fantasies as well. And then we'll clean everything else up that I want to clean up. And so far, that's really just the dragon that needs to die. That's underneath the keep. And so I went to Gortash. I zoned in, and everybody's aggroed on me because I'm a bad guy. I was like, fair enough. That's okay. Started wiping out the lesser units that are around. Without any steel watch, these are nothings. There's been a massacre in the sort of presentation hall, the banquet hall, whatever you want to call it, the throne room. Where Gortash was the initial fight, so he's massacred everybody there. So he's clearly, like, gone mad, ballistic, the Absolute is taking over, whatever you want to say, and to find Gortash. He was now up in his bedroom, which I had been to before during our 3-hour... If you haven't seen that video, you should check it. It was really bad. But, like, I knew where to go and how to access it, because I very thoroughly explored this area, let's put it that way. So, heading into Gortash's room, this was the easiest fight of the bunch, and I suspect... I probably should have done this fight way, way earlier in the game. Long before I'd been to hell and dealt with a ton of other things and got some very powerful equipment and whatever. Because Gortash has, what, like 2 ads? And he has some mechanic going on with some things on the wall that make him, like, vulnerable and not. And I'm sure this is a very cool mechanic if you're struggling to defeat him. Which I wasn't. So I literally surrounded him with my characters so he had nowhere to go. And he just kind of was flaccid and loser and stood there and just took it like a champion. Took it like an absolute champion as I just decimated him into the floor. I felt like I bullied Gortash. I did. I bullied him into the ground. But more importantly, not only do I have the Infinity Stones, in great success, my friends, in great success, I got the loot the Goblin teased me with so many episodes ago. I got the reward that stupid little halfling whatever had hidden on that roof. I found it. I got it. I am resolved and absolved from my previous crimes, and I actually have it. I told you I would get it, and I got it, and I'm happy, and I'm good. Oh, man. But then I did find, I didn't mention this, actually. I should have mentioned this. When I was exploring the Temple of Murder, the Murder Temple, the Temple of Baal, looking for Orin, I did find the way to the Mother Brain. And the game was like, don't go there. It was surrounded, of course, by rats. Endless rats. I did find that, and I was like, okay, I can't go. The game's like, don't go there. You're not, nope, not ready, not ready. I was like, okay. So I had access. Now I have access to the end game. It's like the Emperor's like, okay, we can do it. You're strong. You're good. The Emperor's here. We can go and do it. And we can make our final choice as to what we want to do. I'm like, okay, we're there. Let's finish up before we go to the end game. Let's do what we want to do. And the big thing, of course, was the dragon. I had an issue with pursuing this a little bit. Because despite popular belief, I don't really want to kill things unnecessarily, and I'm sure if I go down and meet this dragon, it's going to end in a fight. I have no reason to, because the story is that the dragon is there to help Baldur's Gate against the Dread 3. I don't need help with that anymore. I've dealt with the scions, the avatars of the Dread 3. I've dealt with that. So I really don't have a reason to pursue this dragon, other than, like, I want to see a dragon, because of course I do. So I headed down there. Right, okay, what I'm about to explain to you guys is what happened to me. And I know that a lot of the people who watched me play this live have played this game for probably several hundred hours and got 6 or 7 playthroughs under their belt. What happened to me very clearly did not happen to very many people, if any. But it is what happened, okay? So I got down into, I found my way in. I had to solve a little puzzle with sparks and torches. So my theory was, do I electrocute the torches, which worked and opened the pathway, which was great in the prison. I did have to kill the lovely guard outside the prison. And I really didn't want to do that. But as soon as I came downstairs, she aggroed me. And she was really nice. She's dead now. By the way, We got downstairs, and there's a couple of puzzles. It was an interesting layout. So I was like, oh, cool, we're doing some puzzles. And it told the story of a thief who is stealing food. So puzzle number 1 was some scales of justice with storyboards of a story being told. And it was of a thief who was stealing food for poor children who gets spotted by somebody and convinced to go and steal a gin lamp or a gin container. But he gets caught, and you see the person who manipulated him into doing it, or convinced him to do it, or bribed him to do it, or whatever, on the sidelines as the thief, who's, you know, been talked into this thing, gets carried away by the officers. So I was like, okay, interesting. Do we put an apple on something? But there's another room I haven't been in yet, which may tie into this puzzle, because I didn't know there was 2 different puzzles, remember? So I was like, okay, that's one puzzle. Let's go and see what the other one is, right? Get our knowledge beforehand. The next puzzle turned out to be a combat puzzle. I picked up a torch, which illuminated the area, and then it says you have to survive for 5 turns. So I had several questions while I was doing this, because the best way to survive is a good offense, obviously, so I started killing the ads. But my barbarian had this torch equipped, which is obviously not going to do any damage, and my barbarian is my biggest source of DPS. But I was kind of concerned, if I unequipped this torch, do I screw up the encounter? Maybe. And the ads weren't particularly hard for the rest of my team, so I was like, I'll just sort of chill. And keep this out and just sort of wear through this, because I can survive 5 turns of anything. It's fine. So I was killing everything with everybody else and got down to the final turn, and I was like, okay, we're probably done here, because it keeps spawning ads. So it's like, okay, even if you kill them, they just respawn. It's really a survival situation. So I was just positioning my guys away from danger as much as possible, and just like, okay, we're done in the next turn, literally the last turn. And one of the enemies was about to attack, I think, Jaheira, who was relatively low health. I can't remember exactly who. So I decided to just throw something at it, because I had a turn, I had an action to do. This is exactly what happened. So I threw, because brain, muscle memory, whatever, my trident, my legendary trident that I had got from the Jinn at the circus, at it, because it returns to me. Great. It's a really good weapon, does good throwing damage, and it returns to me. So I just threw my trident at it. What I wasn't aware of, and I genuinely was not aware this is how this mechanic worked, is yes, it does return to you, but it doesn't return to your inventory. When it returns to you, it equips itself as part of the action. I didn't know that happened. So the very last turn, sitting pretty, I unequipped the torch and it failed. Just as I thought it would at the beginning. I was like, why has that happened? And then it dawned on me is that my trident's equipped itself and it's unequipped the torch. And it failed. So then my thought process is, okay, we did use a lot of resources there. We need to go back, have a short rest, check our spells, and then we'll go and do it again. But what happened then is the room filled with enemies. Undead enemies. Low health ones. Like, I could eradicate most of them in one AoE spell. And then the central hallway connecting the 2 puzzle rooms also was full of enemies. And I was like, what is going on? Weird. So I was like, okay, let's clear these out and then we can go again. This looked to me as a punishment for failure. Like, that's how I was interpreting what was going on. It's like, oh, you failed the trial, then it unleashes all these enemies. That makes sense. If you fail something in Baldur's Gate 3, traps go off, things happen, that's fine. So I was like, okay, let's clear these out, and then we can go again, because they're not particularly tough. And then I realized that the other puzzle room as well, with the apple thing, was also full of enemies. So I was like baiting all these enemies around to kill them all. And then I noticed that the door for solving the puzzle was open. I hadn't done anything. I failed. But the door was open. I was like, so did we win? I was so confused. As was the many, many people watching. Are like, what? Why? And I was like, okay. Apparently we've done the puzzle. Let's go in. And as we go in, Jaheira, after some speech, because it's the thing is all about Baldur, who discovered, who founded Baldur's Gate, calls me a cheater. I'm a cheater. I'm a cheater. According to the game, I'm a cheater. And it was just a whole sequence of events that just snowballed so heavily to make me a cheater. I mean, whatever. Whatever. So, entering there, we meet the dragon's dead. And we then get one of the bigger revelations of the game. As the memory of the dragon, the soul of the dragon, whatever, begins to communicate with us, is that, yeah, and the Emperor has been telling us we don't need to go and see the dragon. And I thought that was indicating that it's like, there's no need to see the dragon because we've done everything. But the Emperor's like, we shouldn't go there, it's bad, the dragon won't help us, it won't even be there. And it turns out that the reason the dragon's dead is because the Emperor killed the dragon in the past. And in fact, the Emperor was once known as Balder, and the Emperor is the person who founded Baldur's Gate. And then a quite interesting story plays out, which I really liked, actually. Was the story of the infection of the Emperor, or Balder, and Ansur being like, eventually you're going to succumb to worm power, and I have to kill you, despite the fact we're best friends. And ultimately the Emperor, in self-defense, had to kill Ansur as well, because he felt he could handle it, etc. And this sort of war between friends about what's right and what's good. I liked this a lot. I thought this was really cool. And we end up fighting the dragon, but because the dragon's already dead, we're fighting like the memory of the dragon, the soul of the dragon, whatever you want to call it. This is my new favorite fight in the game. I really like this. This was the first time I'd really seen... I mean, essentially this fight is Sapphiron from World of Warcraft, for anybody who've ever done that. One of the original vanilla raid bosses, has very similar mechanics, although it's thunder-based. And one thing that was cool is I still had in my bag, because I kind of thought I'd need it at some point, is a ring that protected me from thunder damage. So I put that on my barbarian, and the dragon moves between two very specific spots for most of the fight. So I had Shadowheart at one side and my barbarian at the other, who were... I liked this mechanic of the first person to hit it baits a breath. That just makes you consider positioning a lot, because the arc of these breaths is really large. So I was... we had something similar with Ketheric with his cleave, where you had to be in very specific positions. But this one was like, okay, I can maneuver the dragon around here, avoid some attacks of opportunity, and bait the breaths in certain directions. So I had Shadowheart, my barbarian, baiting the breaths away from everybody. And then they had a cool mechanic with the dragon rising up, which obviously I recognized from my World of Warcraft days of going to do a huge bomb and we need to get line of sight. Loved that. It wasn't a case of just zerg it down. It was like, okay, here's a mechanic where we have to stop thinking about just doing damage or optimizing DPS, which is generally how we beat most fights. Now we have to consider positioning and get everybody in the right spots, use our movements to get there. Did that. And then went back into killing it again. I love this fight. I thought it was really cool. Had a good amount of HP, so I couldn't just blast it. Put people in some danger, so I had to really consider survivability options at the same time. And got some really nice loot out of it. An exceptional helm for Shadowheart, and I got something else out of it. So Shadowheart is now just an absolute beefcake. Super beefcake tank. Yeah, new favorite fight. Absolutely new favorite fight. I loved this thing. I thought it was done so well. I loved how the mechanics interacted with the environment. It wasn't just a case of add more turns or something like that, or some sort of delay to the fight, or something where it's like, you can't see me. Invisibility has definitely been a giant pain in the butt sometimes. Even with my eye that should be able to see invisibility, they save the rolls all the time. This was a fight that I overtook Ketheric for me. I thought this was wonderful. It had the scale and scope of a giant dragon. It had some really interesting ways of dealing with it, and some pauses and slows. It had good pacing. Pacing has definitely been an issue in the latter half of the game for me in some of the fights. This one paid off me massively. So yeah, Ansur was wonderful. Finished that off, and got some really good story beats with it. So it had good story and a good fight. Can't ask more than that. Wonderful. But this does leave us in the position of finishing the game. That's where we're at. And that's what we're going to do. So next time you see us, we're going to the end. So see you then. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.